Now, of the four coloring techniques that we mentioned earlier, linear transparency or linear gradients is perhaps one of the more common ones used in a lot of business presentation slides today. As a very quick example, in the slide that you see before you, you can clearly see it here, where we can see the picture, perhaps on the right hand side, has a lot more transparency added to the color, so the picture really comes through a little bit more, whereas on the left hand side, there's a little bit less transparency in that color, and it just makes it then easier if we place text or content on that particular side to read it. And even with the arrows, we can see a lot of the linear transparency in full effect as well. So it's a very common effect for coloring, and one that we really need to learn to do, and we can apply it to many different contexts in our own business presentation slides. And in many modern day presentations today, and especially business slides, we're seeing a lot more color introduced to them, especially for conferences and events. And again, we're still using just a linear gradient with transparency there, but it's just changing colors there. The reason why we like color there is because simply without it, it's just very difficult to actually see any content whatsoever. So if we do have a full screen picture with content, whether it was black text or white text, you can imagine it would be very difficult to read against this picture here. So let's have a go at our first linear gradient exercise, and we'll make our way to the exercise slide. Now this is a layout slide, so we already have our picture placeholder waiting for us. So this is nice and easy. All we need to do here is simply click on the picture icon in the middle. And once we selected the picture, obviously it's just automatically inserted for us. And before we actually do the coloring, we're going to reorder this picture by sending it to the back, so it goes behind all of our content there. So since we're under the picture format tab, I'll just click on send backward and send to back. Now that's placed it behind all our current content that we have, but obviously you can see it's very difficult to read. Hence, this is why we need a little bit of color to separate the picture and the content. To do that, we're going to use a rectangle shape. So if we go to the Insert tab and click on Shapes, I'm just going to pick an ordinary rectangle. I'm not going to use the Shift key to draw it. I'm just going to draw this freehand. And in terms of the size, we're just going to draw it to the dimension of the picture we've inserted. So I'll go ahead and click Rectangle. And as I said, I'm just going to draw it so it just fills that entire picture. There we go. And of course, we don't want the default red colors. We want to put in our own colors, maybe your own corporate colors. And the way we do that is we head off to our Format Shape box. So I'm already under the Shape Format tab. So to the right of the word Shape Styles, I'll click that little icon and bring up our Format Shape box. Now, the first thing we need to do is just go to Fill. Now you'll see a lot of my defaults for my shapes, which is the red colors, and obviously the type is radial. Now what we first need to do is really just change the type. And types really just describe the color flow. So linear is just sort of straight, left and right, up and down. Radial will kind of give you those cornered edges. Rectangular will give you right angled edges, and path are more concentric layers. So let's just go ahead and pick linear for this exercise. And to help us out, we'll just pick a default direction. And of course, if any of these default directions are not suitable, we can also then customize it by using angle here. So for our purposes, we'll just go ahead and use a default direction. And the one we're going to choose is on the top row, fourth one along, and it's just called linear right. Now we're just going to do a little bit of color changes here. So to do that, we've already got two stops waiting for us, so we're just actually going to change the color. So if you hover your cursor over stop 1 of 2 and click on it, we're just going to change the color, and I'm going to pick a standard color here. So I'm just going to pick a standard color, dark blue. Now you can see we've entered in the dark blue color here, but of course it's a solid color at the moment. There's no transparency. We'll add that in just a moment. But let's go ahead and do the second color. So stop 2 of 2, if you click on that, we'll just go to color. And once again, I'm just going to use a standard color, but I'm going to use purple. So we have this kind of nice dark blue to purple gradient sort of shade inside of there. Now the colors are fine, but obviously we can't see content. More importantly, we can't see the picture through it. So now we need to add a bit of transparency. Now you can apply different levels of transparency to both those colors. So some can be more transparent than others, especially if we want to see one part of the picture on one side and maybe less on the other. So for the purple, or our stop 2 of 2, I'm probably going to add a little bit more transparency there. We can either just use a sliding bar or key in a number, but I'm going to put this to maybe about 30% or thereabouts. So it's quite a high number. Maybe I'll reduce that perhaps to 20%. Okay, so you can already see as I'm changing the transparency, we can see a little bit of the picture coming through, but also the same on the other side, just because of the way the color flows. But if we go to our dark blue color, I'm actually going to give it a very small amount of transparency. I'm going to give it about 5%. So I've just used the arrow keys on transparency just to increase it. Now, one other thing I'd like to do is actually have a bit more of the dark blue color and less of the purple color. And under gradient stops, by moving the color bars around, we can change the stopping position of those colors. So I'm going to push our stop 1 of 2 perhaps to about 40% or thereabouts. And if I just move this out the way, we can see that kind of color gradient just there. Now I'm actually okay with that color gradient. I think that's okay. So the last thing I need to do, if that shape has a rectangle outline on it, we'll just get rid of it. So I'm just going to go to line and select no line. And then I can close my format shape box. So effectively the transparency has been added as with the colors. Now we just need to get it in its correct order. So once again, I'm under shape format. Now we're going to send to back first, and that will send it behind all the other shapes, and then we'll need to bring forwards once so it's in front of the picture but behind the other content items. So I'll just go ahead and send to back, and so that's now behind the picture, and all I'll do is bring forward so it's now in front of the picture but behind our text. And currently this is what our slide actually looks like. So even as it is with the picture and the color overlay, I've seen a lot of business presentation slides just look like this, and I'm sure you have as well in some of your own encounters. But we're just going to practice a little bit more of our linear coloring, and we're going to add 3 arrows to it. So let's just head back to the exercise slide. So we're just going to add our first arrow shape. So we're going to go to Insert tab, and we're going to go to Shapes. Now I'm not going to use the traditional arrows that you see under block arrows, but I'm going to use this one under the second row. It's probably about the 6th one along, and it's called an arrow pentagon. So we're just going to use that one first. So I'm just going to draw it out freehand, just like this, and then I'm going to rotate it counterclockwise by 90 degrees. Now again, we can do some changes to this. Obviously we can sort of widen up the arrow if necessary, just to make sure it envelopes all our content. We can also use that yellow edit point to make that arrow less pointy or more pointy, whatever we need to do inside of there. So I'll just place it here first. Now we'll do the coloring first before I do the reordering. Now every arrow could be a different color or a similar or same color, that is fine. But to color it, we do need to go back to our format shape box. So once again, I'm under my shape format tab. So I'll just click on that little icon to the right of the word shape styles and click format shape. So because we've redrawn this shape from scratch, obviously it now comes with all our defaults again. So we're going to make a few changes just like we did before. So type once again is going to be linear. Now direction is interesting. Because we've rotated the shape, we might need to select a different direction. So for the time being, what we'll do is we'll pick the same one as we'd chosen before, just so you can see what happens when we rotate. And as a consequence, obviously we'd need to change the direction. So what we selected before is what we'll select here. So on the top row, 4th one along, linear right. So now we just need to change the colors. So on stop 1 of 2, what I will do is reselect a color, and I'm going to pick my teal color. So I'm going to pick this under the theme colors. It's just called dark teal accent number 3. Now stop 2 of 2 is interesting. Now by right, if I change it to 100% transparency, we shouldn't see that color. Now what I always find though, and it may be a little bit more difficult to see on this slide, is there is a trace amount of that color still visible, and you might see it when you try your own exercises later on. The best way I found to really kind of get rid of the color completely is to match the color that we chose for stop 1 of 2, even though it's still 100% transparent. So what I will do is for stop 2 of 2, I'll click on it just to make sure I'm on it, go to color and choose the same exact color. Again, it's under my theme colors, dark teal, accent free. And I will just make this 100% transparent. It's just to ensure that there is a smoother transparency and we don't see any kind of awkward red. Now, if you've got a keen eye, you might be able to see a quick difference between this and what we had just a moment ago. Now, we will make a couple of changes, but let's sort the direction out, because the direction seems to be coming at the bottom and very transparent at the top. What we want is really just the opposite of that. Now, since we've rotated it, our direction won't be top or bottom, it will probably be left or right. So if I pick linear left, that's what we'll get there. So it's a little bit brighter at the top and a little bit more transparent at the bottom. Now again, you can play around at this stage with your gradient stops, so you can move the position and you can see how our stop 2 changes where that second color actually stops. And if you wish, you could also on stop 1 of 2, if you click on that, change the level of transparency if you don't want it so prominent there. So I'm happy with that, but the last thing to do is just remove any line, so I'll select no line and I'll close the format shape box. Now I will reorder this just to finish it off, so I will send to back and just bring forwards twice, so once and twice. So that now just puts it in position. Now of course you could just duplicate the same one and put those in position. And same thing, I can just send back and bring forwards twice. But of course you can play around and maybe perhaps change the colors. And so if I just do a very quick example of changing a color, because all the settings are there already, I'll just bring up my format shape box. And just remember, whatever color I put for stop 1 of 2, I'll place the same color for stop 2 of 2. So I'll go ahead on stop 1 of 2 and change that to a red color. And stop 2 of 2, I'll also change that to my red color. But of course I need to push 100% transparency there. So there we have it. That's how you create your linear color gradients and also add in transparency. So look out for business presentation slides that you see either in the workplace or events and conferences, and you'll actually notice this effect quite often. So we're not saying it's applicable for every slide, but definitely where you can apply it, it can definitely make a big kind of difference to a lot of the way that you present your content.